Good evening. Thank you all for being with us. In compliance with Chapter 551 Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a special voting meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, July 30th, 2026 at 6:04 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at Austin ISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome, and thank you again for joining us. We'll begin our meeting with public testimony for the single action item on tonight's agenda. Members of the public wishing to participate in public testimony called a dedicated Austin ISD phone line in advance of the meeting to sign up to speak in person or to audio record their remarks. This is an opportunity for the board to take part in listening to our community. While we wish we could respond to the topics raised, the Texas Open Meetings Act does not authorize the board to engage in deliberation or take action on comments or complaints from members of the public if a subject is not on the meeting agenda. For comments related to posted agenda items, we will engage in deliberations or ask follow-up questions during the presentation of that item on the agenda. Tonight, we have 3 people who signed up to speak in person, and we have 5 people who left a recorded message. We'll begin with our in-person testimony. To provide as many opportunities as possible within a limited time period at this meeting, each speaker will be allotted 1 minute, and no substitutions or yielding of time to others is permitted. Callers who signed up to speak in person will be invited to come to the microphone when your name is called. As you come to the microphone, please press the button to turn it on, and when the buzzer sounds, please make a final thought in 1 sentence. Whether you come to give a complaint or praise, please reference any staff member by position or by abbreviated last name, and we ask that all audience members, whether speaking or not, please show respect for others at all times. Thank you. We have 3 in-person speakers. I'll call all 3 of you at once. First is Steve Swanson, second is Amarie Delgado, and the third is Brian Pena. Oh, okay. So you can come forth. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And if you could share your name when you speak, that would be great. Thank you.
Ready? Good evening. I'm Steve Swanson, a 20-year volunteer for our schools, starting with Eastside Memorial High School, formerly Johnson High School, the first school in Texas closed and renamed by the State Accountability System in 2008. This experience and research reveal our opportunity and responsibility to start helping TEA and stop the harm to our students, schools, and communities. TEA has failed responsibilities in Section 11.254 of the Texas Education Code and in the Texas Rules of Professional Conduct for Lawyers. To serve the board, superintendent, and community in community-based planning and action, serving the needs of students, including suicide and violence prevention. Recent Austin news about a teenager's mental health and loss of life from gunfire, the Austin community speaking out about not being included in the planning of schools, and our schools being rated F and closed, demand that we start fulfilling responsibilities in the Education Code and the rules for lawyers for the board to hold TEA accountable. We must stop harming our students, parents, schools, and community. The handout provides the responsibilities. Having this information, we must use it. Thank you. And where do I give the handout? There used to be somebody over there.
Hi, my name is Amarie Guerrero, and I am a 7th grader at Paredes Middle School. I don't want Paredes to close because it's a built-in home for me. It makes me want to be myself. I love the teachers there. They pushed me to where I didn't think I could be. Our scores went down, and what messed me up were the changes. I was perfect the way that they were teaching us. I was making so much growth, but it went down because of the changes that happened so quick. Y'all are shutting us down because we failed when other schools failed more than us. This school has given me so many more opportunities, and you have Belichick coming in, and now you want to close it down. This is not fair for us kids. Mendez has passed with the help of charter and other programs. Why can't we get that help? This school has helped me make has helped make me and other students who we are today. You have closed our school because we failed. We can always try again, and we tried our hardest with the changes that were made. The district failed us. I know I'm just a kid and stuff, but I will stand here for my school because I really love this school, and you're taking away our happiness.
Howdy, Board Superintendent. My name is Brian Pena. Just a few questions that I hope can get answered tonight. If y'all could explain what caused such sharp declines in growth across subjects and grade levels, any context as to why staffing has become such a challenge at Brevis, the nature of some of those unnamed challenges that y'all alluded to on Tuesday, and then if the EOI was administered in May, if it was possible this conversation could have been had earlier and if y'all had data by then. But yeah, thank y'all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mr. John has just shared that the caller should have registered by 1 p.m. today. I'd love to ask our council if it's okay if we make an exception since someone is here, or if you advise against that.
I'm not sure. So someone in person who...
Someone in person who came but didn't sign up before the deadline.
Oh,
That's our custom.
I mean, you have the rules for a reason, but it's certainly, that is 100% your call.
Okay.
It's a policy decision.
Are we good hearing? Yeah, I would love to hear your comment.
Thank you. Let me know when I should start. Okay. My name is Greg Reck. I'm a former public education teacher. I now work at UT. I formerly used to work at the Texas Education Agency. I'm the husband of a ISD teacher and future father of an ISD scholar. One of the things I first learned as a teacher was how to advocate for our most vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, ISD leadership has seemingly forgot this essential tenet of education while fulfilling its duties. In the past year, 11 campuses have shuttered its doors and programs with little to no community feedback. While this meeting is much appreciated, it is too little too late. The abruption of this closure to Paredes raises serious concerns. Beyond the staggering numbers, there's also unquantifiable impacts. These campuses have invaluable programs. Neighbors of mine have arranged for their schedules to send their kids to Sunset Valley, a campus with a B rating for the record. They told me that their daughters are devastated and anxious to start school at a new school with new faces. Having worked at TEA, I'm acutely aware of the new districts under fire. While the accountability system is inherently inequitable, it has been the law since 2015, and it is time to face the music. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our in-person speakers. We will now play the recorded messages for public testimony, so please listen carefully.
My name is Catherine. I'm a District 1 community member. Austin ISD, as a public education institution, can solve society's problems. We're educating the people who will shape the future and bring solutions. Every student that is being failed is an advocate being hindered, a caregiver being derailed, a community member being robbed of their tools to help their community. You said no more closures, less disruption, and now vulnerable communities are scared. You said the budget deficit was around $20 million, then needed to make tests closer to $200 million. You said you were building affordable housing for teachers, and now it's workforce housing for people who might be married to doctors or lawyers. I hope you reconsider the harm that's already been done in public trust to this point and vote against the disclosure that has already been publicly moving forward prior to this vote. May you vote towards stability that respects the future leaders coming behind you.
This is Marie. I did not record a script for you all. It seems that some of you stopped listening to the community who elected you long ago. Nonetheless, I am calling to implore you to say no. Vote no to closing Paredes, and that is for many reasons. One, the community does not deserve to pay and be harmed for the failures that have happened across Austin ISD. This impacts the community and generations of people. It also creates a blackout in Southeast Austin of schools. Furthermore, we can't close our way out of a takeover, but one by one, our community is being destroyed. The district is saying publicly that there will be no more closures, but privately, closures are still on the table. And at some point, we have to say no. Enough is enough. Our district is being torn apart. Please vote no to closing Paredes. Please end the suffering for our community in closing our schools and work to improve our schools together.
My name is Elena Torres Ponce, and my child is an 8th grader at Paredes Middle School. My question to the board is, would you vote yes to the closure of your own child's school less than 3 weeks before the beginning of a new school year? My most sincere hope is that you would not support any child experience this. If closure truly is the most viable option and our children are forced to endure this drastic hardship, then this administration needs to be held accountable and responsible for the mismanagement of the Paredes turnaround plan. Thank you.
This is Patrick Rosenthal, and I'm the parent of 3 Austin ISD students. We will have at least 5 other high-risk 4 UA schools in the district next year, and I don't see how closing Paredes is going to help us. I know the recent school closure study from Francis Pierman at Stanford proves the district's $2.4 million savings numbers are inflated. I won't pretend to know the ins and outs of every decision this board has to make. At the Texas Community and Schools Summit this summer, I heard some very concerning messages from teachers, administrators, and parents about our TAP schools. We've heard the curriculum isn't flexible enough to allow teachers to spend more time in areas where students need the most support. We've heard that the PLCs in the district meetings often feel more accusatory than collaborative. We've heard there is no backup plan to help struggling principals if the hire wasn't a great one. No one wants a TEA takeover, but for those of us who follow these issues closely, we know that if our TAP schools are not successful, winter is coming. Hold to your principles. Make the corrupt TEA show themselves to our community and reveal how their system has been the root cause of our
Anonymous staff member of Austin ISD. The students and families of Paredes have historically had unique and challenging circumstances, but when faced with consistency and teachers, administrators, and staff that are equipped with the tools to support those difficulties, they can thrive, as proven when Paredes was once a recognized campus. Unfortunately, for nearly 10 years, district leadership has failed to prioritize fully staffing Paredes with highly qualified people who could lift and serve our unique community, resulting in years of instability and uncertainty. It has been stated by district leadership that Paredes was a priority campus and that substantial resources and targeted supports were implemented, but as a former staff member, I can attest that this was not the case. Just this past school year alone, there were 3 math teacher vacancies along with an inclusion math teacher vacancy. It was up to already stretched staff members to fill in when possible and support those classes and students who had gone multiple years without a math teacher. How has the district demonstrated support when a high-needs Title I campus was left understaffed? Where were the resources when many staff members were acting and doing the work of 2, 3, or 4 people? How are learning gaps supposed to be minimized when students haven't consistently been afforded the opportunity for high-quality instruction?
Thank you. This concludes our public testimony. People can share additional comments by email with the board at trustees@austinisd.org. And I also want to remind our community, you can sign up to speak during board meetings. Our custom is that you sign up the day before or the day of before 1 p.m. And you can find all the information about how to do that by searching Austin ISD board meetings and going to the Austin ISD board meeting website. Thank you. Trustees, if you have any questions or comments raised, you're welcome to share them now. But I think they all relate to the item at hand. So I think if you're good, we can move forward. Everyone good? Trustee Kaufman.
I want to thank Amory for her comments, especially. It's, as we say frequently when our students speak, how important it is that your voices are heard and are centering our decisions. So thank you for taking the time to bravely speak in front of the crowd.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right, and we have Trustees Hunter, Foster, and De Urioste on online with us as well. So we'll now move to the next item on the agenda. Mr. Segura.
Thank you, trustees. We have an item for vote this evening, which includes the recommendation of the superintendent to modify the turnaround plan for Paredes Middle School and reassign the students to both Mendez and Bailey. I want to first just recognize the sheer magnitude of the disruption that I'm bringing forward for consideration. This is not something that was planned or intended. Really, when we think about the opportunity to make adjustments as we move forward, given where we are as an organization and the sheer lift that we have when it comes to any turnaround plan, you use the information you have available to you to make an informed decision. And so 2 days ago, I presented on a lot of the why, but I think it's worth going back and just highlighting some of those. And then what I'll do after that is kind of move into some of the things that we've heard over the last couple days, and then open it up for questions. As a reminder, the Paredes Middle School is one of 24 turnaround plans that was submitted to the Texas Education Agency on November 21st of this past year. The challenge that I think the organization has, and any organization that is navigating this turnaround plan like this, is that you have to implement in the year that you approve the plan. And that was largely driven by the compression of accountability for 23, 24, and 25. And so we started the school year, we worked to allocate resources. We knew that a plan was going to be submitted, so we started the year knowing full well that we needed to build and grow in order to be successful and show the growth that would ultimately help break the accountability chain. And that chain extends back to 22, 23, and 24, and then ultimately the 25 school year. And so over the course of the year, as we did with all turnaround plans, we monitored, we evaluated, we made adjustments. We used the resources and the authority within the superintendent's office to allocate and move to support Paredes over the course of the year. One of the things I also want to acknowledge is that in the spring semester, there were disruptions within leadership that kept some of the growth that we saw in the spring semester from continuing on through from the fall semester, continuing on through the spring semester. And that ultimately helped contribute to some of the information that we reviewed over the course of the summer. So over the spring semester, as we received end-of-year MAP data, and ultimately as we began to get student-level performance data from the STAR summative assessment, it became clear that Paredes Middle School did not achieve the growth, that the accelerated growth that was needed to ensure that we continued to move towards breaking the accountability chain. District-wide, however, we did see a lot of movement, and when we think about where we were at the end of the school year, which we don't get that data until really June and into July. I know there's a comment about that. We began to consider what resources, what support, what will it look like when we start the 26-27 school year. And what we know is that the absolute thing that has to be in place for our students to be successful is to have educators in the classroom who love our students, support our students, but understand how to use the resources that we have to support the growth that needs to be observed in the classroom. And at the time when I began to formulate this into a recommendation, we had more vacancies at Paredes than any other school in Austin ISD. And as a reminder, Paredes was no different than others that we've had, where we've allocated stipends, we've made adjustments, we've prioritized staffing, but as the summer progressed, it became clear that it was going to be very difficult for me as a superintendent to ensure that our students and the student achievement that they deserve was going to be able to be met with the resources. And so at that point, we began to explore what a modification to the turnaround plan could be. And so at this time, as I presented to the board 2 days ago, I am recommending that Paredes Middle School, the students there be reassigned to both Mendez and Bailey. You see here on the slide the reasoning for the split and kind of the geographic footprint of the split. The adjacency of the middle schools and the current performance allows us to really expand the attendance boundaries both at Bailey and Mendez and not create kind of jumps in attendance boundaries, and allows us to actually maintain the high school feeder pattern. Both Mendez students and Bailey students in their current form actually matriculate to Aikens High School, and in this instance we're able to preserve that. The other thing we're very mindful of is the capacity at each of these schools. We looked at operational capacity. We looked at the students that reside, that are currently enrolled, the ones that transfer. Many Paredes students right now currently transfer to Bailey already, Covington, and other surrounding middle schools. Lastly, when we think about Mendez Middle School, as one of the committee members that called in, it was recently operated by a charter. We have brought it back into Austin ISD operations. We have great leaders there building the new school, and so we wanted to be very mindful of the total student population as that school begins to grow and kind of become the great school, the great vibrant school that we know that it can be and that it has been in the past. So currently, as we talk about where we are, we presented the proposal 2 days ago. We wanted to share some updates when it comes to where we are on staffing. We released a survey to our staff, and to be clear, this is a missed opportunity last 2 days ago, Trustee Kaufman. The survey actually did go to all staff. It did not go to food service staff and custodial staff because those are not assigned to the campus, but we did have operations come back and actually meet with them. So just wanted to be very clear that each individual that actually works at Paredes did receive the opportunity, most by survey, but a few classified that are tied to food service and custodial. Those are actually by call. So we wanted to understand, what was the preference as far as the receiving schools if we were, if this plan was to move forward. You can see here the total number and percent. There were 63 all staff positions. When you think about the transition to Bailey, 28 or 44% would go to Bailey, 24 would go to Mendez, or 38%. And then about 18% or 11 staff would transition to other campuses. And some of that is driven by just preference, where educators or staff or otherwise just wanted to perhaps go to a school that was closer to home, or go and support a different school level. When you think about the teachers specifically, we were very committed to ensuring that every single person within Paredes stayed an Austin ISD employee. We need them, and certainly they were hired at Paredes to support those students, and we want to ensure that our students, when they're welcomed into Bailey and Mendez, have familiar faces, and faces who understand, what we're needing to do to support those students' academic achievement. You can see here just the breakdown. 15 of those teachers will be going to Bailey, 19 will be going to Mendez. There was a question last night at the conversation, the listening session we had at Paredes around overall vacancies at the two campuses that are receiving. By moving the staff at Paredes to these other two campuses ensures that we'll have a very high staffing rate. I can't yet determine whether it'll be 100%, but it'll be very, very close. And again, it is a priority, and the stipends will be protected for those teachers that move to those two schools. As far as operational staff, including custodial and food service, those conversations are ongoing, but I wanted our trustees and our community to know that, as I've always said, every staff person in Austin ISD, classified or otherwise, has a role to play in the student experience. And so we want them to be at those schools if availability, if the space is there, the vacancies exist, and if not, we want them close by or in the vertical. As we move forward, some of the questions that came about by way of survey or just that we've gotten through the listening sessions, we had questions around enrollment and transfers, space and capacity, transportation, dress code, understanding the decision, and then special education services, and then continuation. So I'm going to highlight some of these. And I'll just want to reinforce that we have FAQs that we've uploaded to the agenda item to support the conversation. But to kind of speak a little bit deeper around space and capacity, we have spent time working through the numbers. The students do fit, but I do want to acknowledge that it's going to operate differently, just like a school does when there's more space or less space. It is something that happens every single year in Austin ISD. We work with our principals, we work with operations, we work with teaching, learning, and leading to determine, what is the space, how is it going to be used, and also I want to communicate, because this is something that's been, I think, a point of frustration, is Matthias, why don't you know the exact number? Well, one of the reasons that we don't know the exact number is because lots of families actually transfer out of the Paredes attendance boundary, and we're using conservative numbers. We're assuming that everybody is going, or we're also not accounting for the transfer options that we've offered for students, recognizing the disruption this late in the process. And so we feel confident that there is space. When you look at historical utilization at these campuses, certainly at Bailey, we get near to where they've been in the past as far as at the maximum, but Mendez, we're still pretty far away. When it comes to enrollment and transfers, it was important that we acknowledge the disruption this is causing this late in the school year, in the summer as we start the school year. And so we wanted to make sure that it was very, very easy for a family to tell us what their preference was, and if there was a different preference outside Bailey and Mendez, make sure that we honored it and promoted that within the enrollment process and effort. So that is something we've talked about. It's something that we're doing and committed to doing. Certainly space is always going to be a consideration, but based on what we've observed thus far, we think that we'll be able to accommodate just about every request. The only kind of exception would be if a huge number go to a school that is severely over-enrolled, but we don't anticipate that being the case given the proximity of those schools to Paredes. The last thing I want to say is we have in-person registration at Paredes on August 3rd and August 6th. We have phone banks. We're calling every single parent within the Paredes boundary, focusing on those who are previously enrolled, because there are some that are enrolled at other campuses, and also continuing to engage via survey so that we're collecting information and making adjustments. When it comes to transportation, this has been a question I've heard multiple times. Just want to kind of reinforce the fact that from the receiving schools, both Bailey and Mendez, the transportation approach will be consistent with every other middle school in Austin ISD. Transportation will be provided for a student that lives outside 2 miles, or if there's a designated hazardous thoroughfare or intersection, and it'll be consistent with the hub model that is being deployed across the district this year. We are kind of looking and just making sure that there's not a missed opportunity, and certainly as the school year starts, with every school year that starts, we can make adjustments if needed. The other thing I wanted to provide extreme clarity on was the dual language program and the expansion of that program at Mendez with the students coming from Paredes, and just reinforcing the fact that they will be provided transportation as well. The locations of the hubs will be released on August 3rd. That is something that's been consistent with what we've been talking about the last several months. And again, every single year we make adjustments when school year starts. So it's not set in stone. If something's not working for a certain community, we will certainly be able to make that adjustment. Special education has been something, and the students receiving special education services and the supports that they're going to receive. We're very mindful of the fact that every student has different needs, and within Austin ISD, we're committed to ensuring that those needs are met. A lot of our work over the last 2.5 years has been specifically in this area. That support will continue. One of the things that's not often known is that the case managers actually reach out and call every one of their students. This is done once teachers come back to school after the contract begins. And that happens across the district, but what we're going to do here is be very intentional. We'll track it also at the district level just to make sure that every family that is moving to either Bailey or Mendez has an understanding of what the supports are going to be like. And also we're working with Dr. Cherry Lee and staff and Woodrow Wilson to make sure that all the staffing needs are there as well. when we come to just like allocations based on understanding of students that are likely to move, we're expecting that Bailey will receive 10 special education teacher allocations, 1 dyslexia interventionist allocation, and 3 teacher assistants. Mendez, based on the population that is likely to move based on the attendance boundary, it's 5 special education teacher allocations, 1 dyslexia interventionist allocation, and 4 teacher assistants. Moving on to the last slide, and I talked about this at the meeting at Paredes, and something that I think is very, very important. Bringing the schools together is something that we don't have as much time to do, and I want to recognize that. Having gone just through this over the last many months, having the meet and greets, having families tour, making sure that there's an awareness and the opportunities to build community before the school year starts is going to be compressed. But we are identifying opportunities. Here we have the Bailey Bear Camp, August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Registration link. We have meet and greets at Mendez and the tours on August 7th. We're finding more opportunities, and these opportunities are going to continue on through the start of the school year. The last thing I'll say around welcome events is that the principals at these 2 schools have been engaged. They've been doing great work and are continuing to find opportunities to bring PTAs together, or CACs together. And one thing I want our Paredes families to know is that they are now part of Bailey and Mendez if the vote is supported. And it's not, it is a culture that already exists, but given the student population that is going, they will very much have the opportunity to be part of that culture. It's not 5% or 10%. This is 45%, 55% of the student population. So it is going to be a new culture based on the total student population coming together. It's important that we talk about it that way, because I understand that each of these schools has their cultures, but many of these students at Paredes, in the Paredes community, already go to Bailey. Some of them already go to Mendez. And the current population of students will be a significant portion of the total. And so families and students, I hope, as I communicate more about this, just understand that it is their community as well. As far as next steps go, if the board was to support this, the notification would go out tomorrow. It will be based on address within the attendance boundary. If you live in an attendance boundary, you will get a letter that says specifically where you're zoned to. It'll have the information regarding transportation and follow-up updates, and just be really clear about what the next steps are for that individual student that lives in at that address. And then again, the last day of school is August 18th. The first day of school is August 18th. We have a project team. We have that's working through all of this every single hour of the day. The work is not going to stop once the vote takes place. It'll continue on. But I wanted to provide an update to our trustees as to where we are, and just also want to acknowledge the disruption that this is, and it's not something that I ever wanted to bring forward, but I do feel as though, given where we are in the turnaround plan, our readiness to start the 26-27 school year, a change in the turnaround plan was required if we're going to support our students in a environment that is going to get the accelerated growth that we need to see in student achievement. So with that, I'll pause, and the entire team here is available for questions if the board has any.
Okay, thank you for that. Trustees, any questions? Comments? Trustee Quintana.
Can we bring up the boundaries again?
Sure.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, I'm trying to look on this little map. I guess I'm just, I know part of this answer is because we have to have enough kids going to Bailey to receive the TAP.
The majority of rising 7th graders and 8th graders must attend Bailey in order for Bailey to receive the turnaround plan.
Okay.
And so we tracked those students, and and it's really a function of density. It's kind of spread like homogeneously across the entire area, but from a density perspective, the denser part of Paredes is to the east, which is why the configuration is like that.
Because it seems like 35 would be like a natural barrier there. Because I'm just worried about the people down here, like in Goodnight Ranch and Onion Creek,
Yeah, that,
going all the way to Bailey when Mendez is, I mean, it's not up the road, but you know what I'm saying?
so we looked at, so there have probably been 4 or 5 different iterations of the attendance boundaries before we got to this one. The one that extends Mendez all the way south to the bottom of the Austin ISD school district moves the majority of the students to Mendez. Even if we had a configuration that moved Mendez west of I-35, so it kind of was like a C, like, because you don't see the Mendez full attendance boundary there, but it's like a C. That also was really, really close. The only way to kind of keep the 45-55 balance was to confine it at Slaughter Lane, and then just kind of come up on the just eastern side of I-35. So it's Slaughter Lane to 35 for the most part. I do believe, however, Trustee Quintana, in a future boundary change, the expansion of Mendez South would be a potential opportunity. So that's the reason why. We looked at lots of different ways to do it, and this is the one that kept that balance. If it's too close and we inadvertently, because of student choice, let's say students choose one program over another, say let's dual language, and they decide to go to Mendez, and all of a sudden it tips over, then the tap will, not accidentally, but out of plan, be moved to Mendez. And obviously with a turnaround plan, there are different expectations, there's a different level of oversight, given that it's that's a 3 UA, kind of progressing. So that's the logic.
So what would have to be, I mean, if it tips over to Mendez, then what would have to be done? You would have to change, you'd have to change like the staff and administration?
We're treating Mendez, so I talked about Mendez receiving the stipends, the resources. Mendez is a school that it's not a TAP, but we are treating it similar to a TAP, resource-wise. And that's acknowledging that it's a new school kind of coming back to Austin ISD. So when we staffed, because the old partner, those weren't Austin ISD staff. So we had the opportunity to bring in staff, and we knew that we needed to staff strong, we needed to start strong. So it wouldn't be too different. It really comes down to, so it's not the resources, it's not the staffing necessarily. I think it really comes down to the systems that are in place to support continued growth, and those systems are established at Bailey because Bailey has not gone through a transition as we're going through right now with Mendez. So Bailey has been consistent as far as systems in place and growing and growing and growing. Mendez is coming back online to Austin ISD, and so I'm just very sensitive to bringing too many students into a school where the systems have not quite codified, because it's a first-year school back. I mean, we see that every time, like General Marshall, when General Marshall came online, we were a load of schools, 6th grade first, then 7th grade, then 8th grade. You're very, very thoughtful about how you bring a school back online, and that's just what I'm really sensitive about. But I do think there's an opportunity in the future to extend down or to expand Mendez, because Mendez does have capacity.
Right, okay. I guess my logic, or not my logic, but I could see a logic where somebody could ask, I've had a lot of parents ask, are we overwhelming Mendez as it is, bringing in these kids? And even today, we had a meeting and they were told, no, it's going to be a better thing that there's more kids here. There'll be more options. There'll be more resources. And so then to turn around and say that adding more kids and a TAP would be, it's just like, it's just hard to see like where the tipping point, like where does it get detrimental?
That's a great question, and both can be true. It depends on the stability of the school, systems in place, the longevity of the leadership. I think there are a lot of things that kind of come into play with that. as a reminder to our community about how we staff schools, it's driven by enrollment, right? And so when your allocation is driven by enrollment, the more staff you have, the more opportunities you have to use those staff within the master schedule to create the programming that you want to offer, which is why when you have larger high schools and middle schools, you tend to see more programs because there's flexibility. And we have talked about that, the IS and certainly in the community. The question becomes, I would say at their current enrollment level, they don't have enough staff to quite get there. Now, would I say 1,000 this quickly? I think that would perhaps be challenging. I think if you go, from where they are now, you closer to 750, 850, and then grow from there. I think it's a better balance. So I think it's a function of time. I think it's the school, how well the systems have been established, the leadership, all those things. But both are true. I think that you can get too big too fast, and I also think that without a fact, and I know it's not even a thing, it's a fact. The more students you have, the more allocations you get, the more flexibility you have in your master schedule, which in most cases means more programs you can offer. So I understand the question. As far as the sweet spot goes, we talk about 750, 650 to 750 as kind of a healthy middle school, 800, depending on the size of the school. As it's growing, 1,000 is not out of question. Once you get to 1,400, 1,500, it kind of gets big if the school's not prepared for it. But we have middle schools that are well over 1,000 now throughout Austin ISD, and that's kind of how they've just operated.
Okay. I worry that, some people are going to look at this boundary split and think that some parents were catered to over others.
If I could, I would extend it all the way down I-35. That was my preference. One of the things that I would say is when you look at the number of students on a map, we have a heat map that shows where everybody lives. We obviously don't release it for a variety of reasons, but I can share with you separately. That is a very dense area. It's just very dense when it comes to the number of students that live in that area. In other parts of, let's say, west of South First Street, it's more spread out. And so you can have a larger area and not have the same number of students. That is really what's driving that. It's not necessarily the neighborhood. It's really the density of students. You don't have to go that big to get a lot of students in. That's why if I moved it ever so slightly south, you actually tip quite quickly.
So there's a greater density between Bluff Springs, Bradshaw Crossing, Onion Creek, that are all going to AISD schools?
Yeah. So think about, so what's at Slaughter Lane? So you think about Goodnight Ranch. Goodnight Ranch is one of the biggest, fastest growing areas in Austin. It's driven the growth at Blazier, which is why we add Blazier, the expansion of Blazier. That is one of the areas that has the most growth. And so that area, if you, in the blue, Blazier's in the blue right now. And so all that density that you see there, that is why even going a couple streets over adds lots of students. It is a very dense area, but that's why. As you move further south and west, it's just not as dense.
Obviously, we can't, make people send their kids to school where we draw the lines. That obviously doesn't happen now. But if I live in Goodnight Ranch, south of Slaughter, right, where it's expanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's expanding north. It's been expanding both sides for a long time.
But if I live south of Slaughter, I'm going to drive all the way to Shady Hollow.
You would be zoned to Shady Hollow, or to Bailey within Shady Hollow, yes, in this map.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Singh?
Okay. I appreciate all of this, and I appreciate the administration making another, bringing forward to us another difficult recommendation. I think, I feel like I'm going to have to support this, but we cannot continue to have surprises like this. That's just not acceptable. So my question to you, Superintendent, is what are the signals you look at to determine whether a school will receive an unacceptable rating?
So, so we talked about it last Tuesday. We track MAP projected proficiency is something that we use. It's not perfect because there are lots of things that STAR summative data relies on that we can't track. For instance, there are some tests that STAR uses that we don't track and that we don't assess throughout the school year, and that's kind of the same across the state of Texas. And so when we presented here in, I think, February, we were sharing with you middle of year data, and it looked promising. It just did. I mean, we had that conversation. We talked about growth. We talked about performance, and that the students were growing at an accelerated rate. And if that continued, then you would expect absolute performance to move. And then over time, you would kind of go up that arc. Now, we track inputs and outputs, as we've shared before. We have had staffing challenges at Paredes. And I think over the spring semester, after we presented middle of year data, by the time the STAR summative assessment was taken, and the disruptions that occurred on campus, coupled with kind of the increase in vacancies that we saw, it just created the data points that we weren't able to collect until MAP EOY, which is after STAR summative. And then those data sets come into us. Student level data comes in on June 12th, kind of begins to trickle in.
Yeah.
It's not complete. So between the 12th, all the way through the beginning of July, we're evaluating, we're kind of assessing.
Sorry, I would interrupt
So
you.
end of year.
So it's test scores. We have the MAP test scores. Obviously, it's pretty clear that that's not a very reliable indicator in all cases, particularly with Paredes when you look at the steep decline from Boy to end of year. From middle of year to end of year.
Yeah, Moy to EOY.
And so you mentioned staffing. Is that so? What I'm trying to get to, what are the main inputs that you are tracking as a superintendent? And this kind of goes back to the academic baseline and why that is so critical that we define what those key inputs are that make a school, so that we as trustees, that you as the administration and our public can say, okay, these are the 5 things that have to exist at any middle school. And if we can track those in a very easy to use way, then we would be able to catch things earlier. And we would avoid these last minute decisions of having to close a school, a month before school starts. So I guess, how do we avoid these pivots? And I'm going to answer my own question and say, here's my request. I would like a very clear list of all the 3 UA schools. We need a public dashboard that says, these are all the schools that are 3 UA, and then once we get our TEA ratings in a couple of weeks, we know we'll have like 4 UA and 3 UA ratings. That everyone should just know what those are. My understanding is our 3 UA schools right now are Paredes, Linder, Pecan Springs, Woolridge, and Sanchez.
No, there's 12 3 UA.
Oh, there's 12. Okay, what are the other 7?
I bet I can.
Are those like the ones that we did with all the consolidations?
So we had to approve 24 TAPs. There are 12 3 UAs.
Okay.
That were tied to the 24-25 accountability. And so out of the 12, right,
Okay.
and this is what we talked about a little bit, we've been monitoring and progressing those turnaround plans over the course of the year. Based on the student level data, we know that many of them have grown at an accelerated rate and are likely to pause or break. We also know that some of those closed. And when you look at all of that, this is I would say, the one, given where we are and as far as readiness to start the 26-27 school year,
Okay.
requires a change in the turnaround.
Yeah,
plan.
I get that. Okay, so
There were 12.
let me go back to the request then. So what are those 12 3 UA schools?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I can
Can you
answer.
just
So
name those so I
Woolridge,
can print that? Okay.
Wynn, Sanchez, Bedichek, Barrington, Martin, Dawson, Oak Springs, Wadane, Paredes, Pecan Springs, and Linder.
Okay. And some of those have been sort of combined with other schools.
Right,
So
so
once you take all of that into account, like, because like Wynn is no longer
Right, the
a school.
turnaround plan strategy for 7 of them were closure and reassign.
Okay, so I think what I want is a clean list of the schools. So if the school no longer exists, that doesn't need to be on the list.
I would put them on the list and then just show like the action for each one of them. 'Cause it's all
Well,
types-
let me
yeah.
tell you what I want. What I want is something that is looking forward and helps us be proactive about our current schools. So what I would like to see is a list of all the schools that are currently active schools. So again, Wynn would not be on that list for these purposes. You can have them on a different list, but like just for the purposes of tracking going forward. And how many schools are there if we take out the schools that have closed? It's not 12 anymore, it's a smaller number.
5.
Okay, so it is those 5.
Yeah, it's the 5. But some of them. Well,
Okay, we can talk about the details, but the whole point is, the schools that are 3UA and 4UA, we have got to have a very clear public dashboard that shows how many UA ratings they've had, okay? And the public needs to truly understand that once we hit 5, that's when TEA can take us over, but we have to make decisions about closures before we even get to that point. And because we don't get STAR results back until like 2 weeks before school starts, it makes it very, very difficult for us, which is why I wonder why we're still using the STAR. But, so it really does put us in a bind, but we have not done everything we can to get ahead of this. And so, again, public dashboard with our 3UA and 4UA schools. We've got to have that. And then in addition to that, we need to show the beginning of year and beginning, middle, and end of year, all the MAP scores as we go through the year, so we can very clearly see what the risk level is, what that trajectory is looking like. But as we've seen with Paredes, it is not foolproof in any way, shape, or form. There are other things that are going to directly impact these student outcomes. Staffing is one. You guys have got to tell us when you're having trouble staffing schools. We need to be extremely clear. I'm hearing from public callers that, some kids didn't have math teachers for a couple of years. That's not acceptable.
I agree.
So just like we did with SPED, and we poured all these resources into SPED, we've got to do that for campuses. I've heard over and over again, Pecan Springs hasn't had a librarian for years. It's like, it's okay, if these things are happening, we as a board need to know about that. We can't just hear about that piecemeal from constituents. And so the only solution I can see is a very public dashboard, which shows very clearly what the vacancies are every month, and what subjects, and then what you're doing about it. And then I would say by no later than November or December of 2026, we have a really thorough presentation of the status of all of these schools and make a decision then and there if we're going to close schools or not. We have just no more surprises. I'm supporting this vote only because, as usual, if I don't, I feel like I'm putting the whole district at risk of a takeover. But it's getting harder and harder to support. It's getting harder and harder to support things at the last minute.
Trustee Singh, we already began ideating on an internal dashboard, not just for the 3 UA campuses, but all campuses with a turnaround plan to track staffing, not just the MAP scores, but our curriculum-based assessments, which are more frequent,
observations,
attendance, all those things, so that, and I think what you're asking is that some of that becomes public.
Absolutely, and I think as a board, it would be very helpful for us to actually vote on what those criteria are going to be, because that way that will force a really robust discussion on what they are, not because we would disagree necessarily, but just by having a separate presentation, say these are like the 5 or 6 things that the administration is tracking, and this is why we've included them. That's going to really make us focus, and so it doesn't just become a consent item vote, but we've got to have really robust conversations about this.
And Trustee Singh, if I may, we as a board put a constraint on our scorecard that relates directly to this. And I think these are the questions that we need to work with the administration to figure out exactly how we're going to measure that and how we're going to talk about that routinely as we go through the year. And that's exactly why.
I know, and I'm so glad that we're doing that. I do, so it's July 30th, my hope is by, at our next voting meeting, you already have that.
We know them all, and we track them.
Like, I want to see a draft of that public dashboard, like in a month. In a month. It makes it really hard for me. I can't speak for the whole board. It makes it hard for me to do my job if I don't get this information well in advance.
Thank you. Anyone else with comment or question? We have some trustees online. Vice President
It's
Gonzalez.
Trustee Hunter.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Okay. Yes.
Hunter?
Yes, please, Trustee
Oh,
Hunter.
perfect.
Hi.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for the superintendent. Again, apologies for my absence. I'm in my new home, obviously. I have less confidence and actually have been really struggling with the idea that we vote to amend the turnaround plan, which is what we're doing, and then it is not accepted. And I get that the confidence is high. The confidence was high last time. So you can just look at me as, once bitten, twice shy. I'm just, not for today, right now, but I really need a contingency plan that the district is saying, if this is not accepted, here's what we're gonna do. Because in this situation, we are literally damned if we do and we are damned if we don't. And I, like Trustee Singh, and feel like my hand is being forced. Simply because I know now that this puts us at risk. I mean, we're already at risk. It's not like this is some random new risk. We are already at risk. We're still waiting for August 14th. But should we survive that, we would then be back in the mix again if we don't make this move now. So not for right now, but I really need a contingency plan if the agency does not approve this.
Yes, I mean, Trustee Hunter, that's precisely what we were doing the entire time. I think it was the confidence in execution of that plan, given where we were starting. And like I said before, there were 24 turnaround plans. There were 30 Fs 3 years ago. The resources and the focus it's spread, and we have been moving the system, and I think outcomes will show that, no doubt. But you're absolutely right. If the board doesn't vote, or if the TA declines it, which I have extreme confidence that they'll accept it just because of the process that it requires, then we have an approved TAP already. And it'll be all the resources poured in to continue on and execute that. It's just, based on what I've observed and based on where we are in implementation, it doesn't always just work by putting the pieces together. The culture, the systems, those things have to be in place, and it's difficult given what transpired this year.
I get that. I understand that better than anybody in that room. I have done it 3 times, at Webb, at Reagan, and at Martin. I get what it takes to turn a school around. Yeah. My concern is what Trustee Whitley Chu has laid out for us is that literally the deck is stacked against us. We move left, we go back 2 spaces. We move right, we go back 2 spaces. I am saying, what is our plan? What date are we going to get an answer? Because it has, you see what I'm saying? What date are we going to get an answer from TEA?
We weren't given a date, but that they are aware of our rushed need for an answer.
Here is what I need to just put on the record, if there is such a record. No way in hell are we going to move these kids. They deny it and we move them back. That cannot happen. So however that positions us, that's how that positions us. We cannot undo this.
Yep.
Okay, finally, the piece about staffing. I, again, been there, done that. I understand the staffing. We have not made it clear to our community. There is no magic staffing button. If people don't want to teach there, they don't want to teach there. That's just how that works. And sometimes you can give them more money and people will teach there, but sometimes there ain't enough money in the world. Because at this point in my life, I cannot do this. I have small children. I can't be doing extra hours or extra extended year or whatever the situation. I have a parent I'm caring for. So that adds to all of that. And as we as a district need to start, literally, I know we are doing like 5 different things to grow your own, but that is not clear to our community. Again, that public dashboard, all of those types of things have to be out there. So anybody who wants to know, because it's a little bit of like, sometimes you got to dig for this information. Like if you want to know and you're in it like we are, you can find it. But if you're just wondering, and I was talking to some people this week who are ambassadors for us, and they're like, is there a place I can go one-stop shop? And I'm like, there is not. This, what Trustee Singh has asked for, would be a great one-stop shop for anybody who is curious to know, to be able to take the temperature of the district themselves with the data that's there. Again, that has to be kept up. It has to be literally transparent. We can't be holding data back. It is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online? We have Trustee Foster, Trustee De Urioste. We have a hand up. Thank you. You ready to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So I kind of had two lines of, I guess, inquiry for the administration on this. The first is because we're kind of talking around a lot of overlapping issues, but I want to be very specific about this specific vote on why we're proposing to change this turnaround plan. Because as you stated, we already have a turnaround plan in place that goes through this school year. So I want to be crystal clear on, if
Yeah. So,
what, yeah.
So one of the things that I think a lot about since the moment I came into this role is implementation, right? Implementation is what AISD has not been successful at in years past. Special education order, we think about the things that we've been taking on. The turnaround plans have to be implemented with fidelity. And there are things that we can do as administration, as Trustee Hunter said. We can offer stipends, we can move staff, we can do these things, and we have demonstrated the ability to do it. We've done it recently this year. We move staff from one school to another, which is something we almost never ever do in an effort to ensure that there was a qualified educator in that classroom serving that student, those students that had the highest needs. When we look at where we are, I can say, with a fair amount of confidence, based on all the data I've seen, and I think our trustees have seen this as well, as far as where we're moving, and that's because the implementation of these turnaround plans of the system work, MTSS, the list goes on and on and on, is working. Here at Paredes Middle School, when we think about why implementation isn't occurring in the way that we would expect, there are lots of things that drive that. Yes, we have pursued and we've promoted hiring. Hasn't worked. We have put systems in places. They weren't codified in a way to be resilient enough to not be impacted once the disruption occurred at leadership level, meaning that we had leadership that was at the campus. The systems weren't quite codified because of where we were with the multiple changes of the last many years. And so once that occurred, the system supporting the students did not kind of get the outcomes that we would expect. And so now we think about next year. Well, what do we have to do? We have to make sure that the staffing's there. From where we are and where we have to be, that is a big, big ask. Why are staff not choosing Paredes? Because we don't have these same staffing levels everywhere in the district. We don't. And there's lots of middle schools that have had similar histories that have much higher staffing rates. And so it's really, when it comes to implementation, I can implement the existing plan, and that was essentially doing what we did this last year, right? Which requires staff, requires systems,
and requires leadership structure to ensure that those systems get placed. And it's not Matthias, it's all the way through, but most importantly at the campus level. I am not confident that we can do that at this point, given what I've observed. Now, if the vote doesn't take place, I will move mountains, as always, to do it and get as far along as we can. But I'm not certain that it would be better than having those students go into systems that are already established or well underway of being established, because we've been working on them for the last 6 months. So that's the reason, Trustee De Orioste.
Well, I appreciate that. For my part, I still need to distill that further. And so, correct me if I'm wrong here, or please, add to my framing here. But what I'm hearing you say is, because this is a strain either way. And so, what I'm hearing you say in that statement is that you think some of these systems that were designed arguably with a different intention, certainly a different load of students, a different, full roster, that can handle the additional burden rather, I apologize for implying that students are burdens. That's not what I'm saying, but the additional workload that we would be putting on those campuses compared to bolstering Paredes.
Correct.
According to the plan we have. So to me, that sounds like a staffing issue. And I know you just made reference to some of the other campuses we have, but my concern is this a growing trend? Because we were hearing complaints about staffing last year from other campuses, and we have so many TAP plans going. And not to completely disagree with Trustee Hunter's characterization, I think you can pay people to do these jobs. We're not paying them enough. We're not attracting. When we needed to get more diagnosticians, we were able to raise the pay enough to attract diagnosticians in from other districts. But, when we look at the number, as we're saying, with all these other turnaround plans, with all these other campuses that are going, having this type of recommendation, because I know from, my personal experience at this point, I have an impression of how you operate and how you tend to make choices on what you bring to us to propose. It's alarming to me because it really seems to imply that there's a growing staffing issue. Because again, we heard these complaints from the other middle schools last year. I was receiving emails, similarly concerned, and not to mischaracterize this as a indictment of staff or anything. We need the best possible staff for the hardest possible jobs. And to say that we have a hard job and we can't get people to apply for it is really concerning for me. And I'm worried that it's not just at this school. We submitted a plan. The plan was approved. It covers also next year. I understand you're saying, that was a 2-year plan, right? We would see some growth, this past year, and if that wasn't sufficient, the rest of the growth would happen. We would aim to do it in 1, but that plan contemplated 2 years. We didn't see enough growth in 1 year. But I mean, the number of turnaround plans and the reality of how we're implementing these, I would think if we had the resources, because we have been able to do it in other places, that we would be able to deploy staffing that would be able to complete this plan and at the very least get a pause in 1 year, which I know is, again, a huge ask. But I just want to be clear, because what I'm hearing is that this is largely about us not having enough staff, because the scores and the testing and all the things that was going on, that was happening earlier. There were concerns there. And maybe to put it a different way is, if Paredes had earned a pause or had eked out through accountability, and we still had this same level of staffing, would you have the same concern about the ability to serve the students this year?
So again, it's 2 things, because the accelerated growth now has to occur they have to cover the gap that perhaps wasn't covered last year and take that on this coming year. So it needs to be even further accelerated in a shorter window. So it's not, if they would have gotten, if we had student level data that suggested that there was enough growth
to where we were going to achieve the second part of that growth or even had more time because we were moving towards a pause, then yes, because that would make sense. The growth that was required to actually continue on that trajectory was going to be able to be met within 1 year. Now we have to grow effectively twice as quickly we have to go twice as much within half the time. I mean, effectively what's happening. And that's, just to be clear, I've reviewed all the other data across the entire school system. This is not consistent with what we're seeing elsewhere in the district. And that's one of the things, that's why I'm not bringing multiple schools or why we're not having conversations around amending other TAPs. This is, one of the unique instances based on how big we are that it just didn't work the way that we would have hoped. And there are a variety of reasons, and I know the staff worked really, really hard. I want to be really, really clear. It was not our students' fault. It was a system. It was the history. It was a lot of pressures on Paredes. And when it's that sensitive, a disruption can take us off track. And so now the question becomes, do we feel confident we can make all the changes and make all the growth back and still get to where we need to be? Or is it, better to move the students to systems that have already demonstrated either the ability to be kind of positioned well starting 26-27 school year, or have been in place and have demonstrated growth year over year, even with disruptions at the leadership level, which is what we have seen at Bailey. So that's why Trustee Dodios did. But you're right. If we had gotten the growth, and I wouldn't be making the same recommendation because I wouldn't have to. We would have more. The growth wouldn't be required at the same amount of time.
Well, I guess what I was implying with that is, do we have enough staff this year? Would we have had enough staff?
So, I don't think that we would have been able to maintain the staff. I think one of the things we talked about in the last meeting was we have done this in the last 2 years where there was such a significant need that we worked with principals and relocated staff from one school to another, based on certifications, based on the educators kind of understanding how to support different student groups. And it doesn't always work out. Just because an educator has performed well in one part of the city doesn't mean that it's going to work well here. And we saw that multiple times this year, and we had to make adjustments after the fact. So it's not, we have 5,000 educators, but that's not how many people are available to support this one school. A science certification, a math, they all are just, it's not as big of a universe of a pool that actually make me feel confident that we would be able to get there this year. And again, it's culture and climate. If it's one or two, and then vacancies, the school can usually work through and then hire someone in early August. Here, because we're over 10, close to 15, 16 vacancies, you shouldn't start out that way. You should not end the year that way, but that's where we were.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, again, my concern is if this is a growing trend because of previous complaints of staffing shortages, whether it's just a position here or there, a math teacher here or there, to me, this, raises a concern of whether this is growing, particularly because we have more turnaround campuses. And the other element is that, this type of change, again, I do understand the rationale of why this would potentially be good for students, or at least less harmful than providing them an understaffed campus. But my concern then becomes the additional strain that we're putting on the admin of the accepting campuses, of the staff of the accepting campuses, like the stress that we're putting there, and whether the sustainability of that type of thing. We're already in such a crush kind of situation across the district, and we, these type of moves are continuing to add strain, and I'm very worried about how we're going to get out of the labor deficit, because with the cuts that we're doing, we have continually been asking people to do more for less, and it's not shocking to me that we weren't able to staff sufficiently by the start of school, because there were reports like that last year. It just seems that it was worse this year, and I appreciate your response to me earlier, but this is the kind of sentiment that I'm hearing from the community as well, at least, you know, in my efforts to reach out. You know, if this is a real trend, you know, we need to figure out how to get it ahead of it. I'm just really, really concerned about not having enough staff. You know, I brought it up around vacancy savings, and I'm bringing it around this too. Like, if we just don't have enough money to employ the people that we should be employing, I think we need to make that very, very upfront. And if we're not able to perform a turnaround plan because we don't have the staff, I want to make sure that that is part of the conversation. I get that you're saying that it's more progress that would be required in this year because of the lack of progress last year. You know, again, there are teachers, there are people that do these jobs. You know, not again to discount Trustee Hunter's comment. You know, you can get that level if you can pay for that level, and if the job is worth it. And you know, I'm worried about that sentiment, and I don't really know much more to say about it. It's just really concerning to me.
Right, thank you. Trustee Foster, I know you're online with us. Do you have anything you want to ask or share?
No, I really appreciate, as always, everyone's questions. The really resonant piece with me, I'll just offer, is this notion of getting ahead of things. And part of the reality is it doesn't feel like it. But, you know, last year, when Dobie, Burnett, and Webb were, you know, looking at a fourth F, we as a board made a really, really tough decision to sort of full steam ahead and, you know, really work in context of community and with local, you know, with campus staff and administrators to lean into the possibility that Burnett, Dobie, and Webb, you know, could improve in terms of the state metrics, and we would, you know, pause or break the accountability chain. And we had as backup 1882, with an understanding that we got to a place where there was an 1882 partner that the state had previously worked with and approved. So we had a plan and we had a backup plan, and that turned out to not be enough. Unless I'm sort of misunderstanding sort of the cadence and what happened last year. We had a plan, we had a backup plan, it wasn't enough. What I see us doing here, what I see the administration doing here that I appreciate, is that we see that fourth F coming and we're pulling the plug earlier, which is exceptionally jolting for the community in the middle of the summer. Some folk are going to come back and figure that this happened, but it is ironically, and it's like a tragically correct step for I think the board and for the administration to make this move now, as opposed to going into another year and saying we think we can, and let's, you know, lean in and get it done. We have to pull the plug earlier and make these really gut-wrenching decisions earlier. So I appreciate that. And that does not one bit diminish what I heard from Trustee Singh and Trustee Hunter. We need a plan, we need a backup plan, and I think we need a backup to our backups, which is horrible because we don't have that kind of bandwidth to be making 3 different blueprints just in case. But nonetheless, we got to have a plan and a backup and a backup. I understand our backup now is to, you know, is kind of proceed with the tap as is. But I too would like to see more metrics applied earlier, more conversation earlier, and we as a board being ready to make really difficult decisions and communicate those with our community. Some of our biggest allies, like, I'm talking about our community members who are just dialed in and paying attention. One of the things that I hear a lot, and I get it, is and to my core, I like this as an educator and as an administrator, as a leader. I want to be prepared, and I want to be proactive instead of reactive. This is one step closer to being proactive, but it sure as heck ain't proactive. We're still in reactive mode. So I appreciate aspects of this really tough decision, but at the same time, I want to lean in to the good words of my colleagues when it comes to plans, backups to backups, early metrics, and early decisions.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So I've spoken to a number of families over the past 48 hours, over the past week since this idea has been proposed. I did want to address a couple questions. One is about registration. If a family has already completed the registration process for Paredes Middle School, will that registration transfer to their new zoned campus, or will they have to begin the entire process again?
No, we're going to essentially, it will continue on, but we're going to have a phone bank, and we're calling each parent, each guardian, and making sure we have contact with them to make sure they understand all the different components of it. Because we've had some talk about transfers to other schools. Does that still hold? So yes. So there's 2 registration dates that we've listed.
Yeah, but not to upload everything again or go through the whole registration process again, just to understand their choice.
Yeah.
Okay. Additionally, I was at the Mendez community meeting this afternoon. Something that was really driven home that I want to understand better by some of the families and staff at Mendez is not what or the things that the district was already planning to offer, but specifically because of this circumstance, what additionally is going to be available. For example, if I'm thinking I'm in administration at, I'm going to use Mendez as the example because that's where I heard this, and I've already gotten my master schedule figured out, and now this is happening, and there's so many concerns that I've heard from Paredes family, specifically with students that are on IEPs. Who's going to help rewrite that master schedule? That's a massive lift and an incredibly intricate puzzle to restart at 0 on July 30th. So what additionally is going to be provided aside from the 2 counselors that are already going to be at Mendez?
So, Trustee Gonzalez, last year, mid-year, after the fall semester, we sent in supports. We created a team network led by an executive director, supported by technology, and supported by teaching, learning, and leading. And we went into the 3 middle schools that we've talked about before, and we worked with them to modify their master schedule. And so that's the type of support that we're talking about. It's not going to be only on the counselors. We have resources here within technology, within TLL. We're contemplating the exact same configuration. It won't necessarily be as disruptive to both campuses in that we're wanting to ensure that the master schedule and the preferences that have already been provided to students is maintained. And certainly that's a priority for us, right? If a student's already identified the classes that they want and the schedule's already been set, we need to preserve that to the best of our abilities. Because there is unique programming at some of these campuses that a student may want to engage with. But we have those supports, and that's what we're contemplating. But we have been in constant conversations with our principals. They're providing feedback to the process too, because we're going to follow their lead also on need. How they want to configure the master schedules is going to help determine the amount of resources we deploy. If we're building off an existing one, probably more similar to what we're doing at Bailey, because it's already set in a way that could easily accommodate the incoming students, then it'll be more of that. If it's maybe something different at Mendez, then it'll be more of a centralized support. So that's what we've done in the past, and we're doing the exact same thing. So we can do it, especially at this scale.
I appreciate that example, but I also want to caution, you're talking about what systems were put into place to address, to support the 3 middle schools, and was that sufficient? I know there are a lot of variables that go into creating a functional middle school on the first day, and if I'm reflecting on the last year's accountability, was that enough for those 3 middle schools?
I think having a master schedule that meets the student needs, supports the number of minutes that are needed to support special education services, that was the balance that was, I think, that needed to be reinforced as those got revamped. I think here, as part of a lesson, that I want to learn, or a reinforcement, is they need that support now. Like, it should not be built and only owned at the campus level. The administration, the district needs to come in and support them as it builds out. I would say that in most cases, in almost every case in Austin ISD, the responsibility of building the master schedule is the principal, then goes to executive director, then assistant superintendent. In this case, we are in it earlier. That wasn't the case at the 3 middle schools. It was built locally, and then we came in after it was launched and then modified. That's the opposite here.
I think that is the reassurance that I am hearing that families desire to hear, is that this is going to be an all-hands-on-deck situation, and that the district is going to wrap their arms around these 2 particular receiving campuses to support all that those students and staff are going to be experiencing.
Do you want to add anything to that, Dr. Wilson, or did I miss it?
You covered it well. Also at Bailey and Mendez, we have principals that are very well versed in master scheduling and are familiar with our internal systems and the processes that we use to master schedule. So this is not something that's new to them. This is something that they've been in the practice of doing in their previous years of experience in administration. And also, like Superintendent Seguda stated, we have operationalized teams to support centrally, such as our executive director of counseling and our coordinators and counseling support that will be there to help, in addition to Mendez, in addition to Paredes counseling staff. We certainly don't want to be disruptive when it comes to looking at the master schedule. We also want to be thoughtful. We heard some very thoughtful comments at the listening session earlier this afternoon at Bailey, where comments were expressed about not wanting, if this vote goes through, not wanting Paredes students to feel as if classes are just built with them, and that's most certainly not what we're going to do. So we want to have seamless integration at both Bailey and Mendez, and in order to do that, it will cause some reworking, it'll cause some revisiting and reviewing, but we want to honor course requests, honor scheduling, and then be able to open up opportunities where possible to allow for other offerings.
I would be thrilled to be there on the first day and participate in a smooth launch.
I'll invite you if it's approved.
I guess I'll close with this. First, I want to say thank you to the Paredes teachers, the staff, the parents, and especially the students who stayed after last night's community meeting at Paredes to speak with me. You did not have to stay. You didn't have to come back tonight to speak again, but you shared your love for your school and your fears about what is coming next for you and your peers, and I want you to know how those things inform my thinking. I also want to say plainly that the responsibility for this moment does not rest with you, students, nor with the teachers, nor with the families of Paredes. Over the past several years, there have been meaningful academic improvements across many schools in Austin ISD, and I know that that improvement is possible because I have seen it happen, unfortunately, elsewhere. The difficult reality is that our district administration has failed to manifest that same level of improvement at Paredes. That failure belongs to adults, not to children. And the tragedy and the disrespect that people now are being asked to bear the greatest burden are the very same people that are least responsible for creating this situation. Our students and families did not cause these circumstances, and yet they are the ones whose lives are being disrupted most profoundly. As a trustee, however, I cannot vote based solely on what should have happened. I have to vote based on how and where students will have the greatest opportunity to succeed beginning this school year. And that does not excuse this process. I continue to believe that this recommendation came much too late. Families deserve more time, more certainty, more opportunities to shape the conversation before arriving at tonight's vote. And there should be accountability for that failure beyond these families, because that is unacceptable. If this motion passes, I expect this board's oversight to continue and to increase immediately. I request the administration return to us at our August board meeting regularly and regularly thereafter with a comprehensive update on this transition, including transportation, staffing, the special education services, extracurricular offerings, student supports, and any issues that may have arisen during implementation. We owe it to these students and to these families to ensure that the promises that have been made over the past week become a reality. Tonight is one of the most difficult votes that I have had to cast as a trustee. And my vote is not, I repeat, is not an endorsement of how we arrived at this point. But it is an acknowledgement that our responsibility is tonight is to make a decision that we believe gives students the strongest opportunity for success while continuing to hold the administration accountable for delivering on those commitments to the butt of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Willie-Chu.
As a native Houstonian, I know what students lose when the state takes over their district. As a trustee, I know it is my responsibility to do everything in my power to prevent that. But as a mom and a teacher, it doesn't make this decision any less devastating tonight.
Thank you. Trustee Kaufman.
So I unfortunately was not able to go to Paredes last night, nor was I able to go to Mendez today, but I did go to Bailey today. And I appreciated that there were, I don't know the count, but it seemed like a couple hundred people were there to speak and to ask questions and to be heard. And so I really just want to thank those people who took time in the middle of a work day to go and attend those meetings with short notice. I'm curious, and I was able to speak to some staff members from Paredes afterwards who had come there, and it was really, good to hear the voices of Paredes as well. I have many pages of notes from that meeting. I'm not going to go through a summary of everything I found, but I categorized them into categories of trust and communication, the disruption to the school and the community, the impact on students, and potential impact on safety concerns, and on some real questions around, intergovernmental communication and collaboration with ISD and the city and the county. And so I will share those comments. I'm not sure what notes were taken at the meeting today, but I would like to see the notes that were taken at all three meetings. And I would also I'll share mine with you as well. Some specific questions come out of that. I have a question about scheduling. There was an answer given around master scheduling at the meeting, but I would like a very succinct and clear answer to the potential impact on the Bailey families and students on their electives and athletics and class choices. What do we anticipate about this? What is the likelihood that even if there are changes in schedules, that students will still have the courses that they signed up for and selected?
Yeah, so there is a high likelihood that some courses or some schedules will be adjusted with the...
I understand the adjustment, but will students be no longer in an elective that they had wanted to be in, or rather than it's fourth period instead of sixth period? But are we anticipating there will be changes where students don't get to take the art class that they wanted to take, or don't get to be in the athletics that they wanted to be in?
I can't guarantee at this present moment. We have to see the number of students that are actually coming to Bailey and then assess that with a full review of course requests. There are times at every school where if the first option is not given, then we try to, accommodate by giving the second option or the third option. They're ranked on the course selection sheet.
Were Bailey students already aware of what their courses were going to be for this year? Not necessarily the full schedule, but were they aware, oh yeah, great, I got the music class that I wanted, or I got the advanced academics I wanted?
No, not to my knowledge, but they are aware of what they submitted in their course selection sheet, how it's been prioritized with the ranking.
Okay, so they have not been given an answer yet saying, yes, you have these classes. So if there are changes made, they're not going to be reversing a communication that's already been given to them?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, I thought you were telling me something else.
Okay. And where are we on the likelihood of the courses that are being offered at Bailey and Mendez being open to the students coming in from Paredes, and the likelihood that the classes that they were going to take at Paredes are offered at both Bailey and Mendez? Like, are the Paredes kids going to be able to get the classes that they, have access to the same classes they had at Paredes? And will they have access to all of the other classes that are available at Bailey and Mendez?
Yeah, just thinking about the master scheduling process, of course, we're not going to press the go button until there's a vote, but you would look at, the course numbers should match more or less, but if there are nuanced differences, we would find the best match. It would be the Bailey master schedule that is the base, and we would expand from there and then map students into that coming in.
Yeah, I think, as we think about welcoming students into a new campus, familiar faces, but also doing the best we can to ensure that what opportunities existed at one school that may not exist at the second school, to the best of our abilities, trying to expand the master schedule to incorporate them. That's the goal. I think to Dr. Wilson's point, it's difficult to guarantee because we're not sure how many students are actually going to move if this vote takes place. But that's our intention. We absolutely want to provide those opportunities that were there at Paredes, at Bailey, but it's a guarantee is not something we could offer, Trustee Kaufman.
Okay.
But where we could, we absolutely want to.
Okay, thank you. And this question has come up a few times, so I just want to ask it again. Why not reopen Bedichek and move Paredes students there?
So you could not one main reason is that the Bedichek's last rating is unacceptable. You cannot move students from an F-rated campus, which is what Paredes had in 2025, to another school that has a receiving rating. Now we know that 25, 26 is not final, but that is the main driver, would not be accepted.
So, to clarify on that with the timeline, so because a decision like this can be made at the last moment, can last year's accountability scores impact those choices? Like if a school came in at higher, if Bedichek came in at higher, at a C or B or an A, at that point, could a last minute decision be made to reopen that in, obviously the timeline, but theoretically? Or vice versa, if a school that's receiving students was at a A or a B, and suddenly is at a C or a D, can that school still receive students?
Not theoretically that way. So there's a provision that I think occurred multiple years ago where a decision was made by a school district to vote on the closure dependent on the rating that they received that year. And so essentially what happened is the Board of Trustees at that school district voted, I think in August, to say, if this school gets an F, we close. If it gets a C, we continue on. That was I don't want to call it a loophole, but that was something that was available in the administrative code at that point. It has since been closed, so that's not possible. The other way that we're talking about now, unfortunately, the only rating that stands for that school would not allow us to actually approve.
So is that based on the timing of the decision? So because right now the latest rating is 24, 25. And so if this decision is made before August 14, when the new ratings come out, then that's the basis of it. But if this decision were made on August 15, it would be using the new ratings. I'm speaking specifically about the receiving schools.
Yeah, so I think potentially that's a consideration. The one thing I would say is I
don't really mean it's a consideration. I just mean is that how it works? I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just saying, is that how it works?
It's not how the only. Theoretically, could that possibly be done? I think the answer might be yes. The only thing that I would say is the turnaround plan and the implementation of the turnaround plan is something that is reviewed. Right. So,
and I don't mean can it be done. I really literally mean if the rule is you can't send students from when you're closing a school like this to a school that has a D or an F.
But one more.
Or if the rule is you must send them to a school that's an A, B, or C, what, is that based entirely on the most recent rating?
Yes, but that's half the story. The other half is that the way they closed the loop that Superintendent Segura was talking about was saying that you cannot close a school in the year that you could receive your 5th unacceptable rating.
Mm-hmm. And so that year begins August 15th, or that year begins
Once the school year
first day?
starts, yeah.
18th is when the school year starts.
Right, so that begins the first day of school, or begins the first day after the ratings come out?
I would think August 18th when the school year starts.
First year.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So someone at the meeting today referred to a school desert, and this was talked about, I think, at a comment by one of our speakers on Tuesday as well. So we're going to have this section, a large section of South Austin that has no middle school. Betachek is much closer to Paredes than the other two schools that we're sending him to, but now both of those schools are closed. So a question that came up today to me was, what is the potential that we're going to reopen one or two of those schools in the future, particularly given that we just voted to authorize a long-term lease or whatever for Betachek land. What is the potential that we could reopen one or both of those schools in the future if the enrollment justifies it?
So I would look at one and both very differently, just in full transparency, just given the number of seats where we are. If it was 10 years out, maybe it's 2, but do I think that there's an opportunity to evaluate as the academic vision and framework progresses, the ability to open one of the schools? I think that opportunity does exist. So yes, I think that absolutely could exist.
Are we precluding that possibility by authorizing a lease on the Betachek property?
So I would, the Betachek property has a lot of space. If you think about other middle schools that we have,
It's the property, it's the land that we're potentially leasing, not the building.
Well, we're not leasing any occupied, owned facility space. So we're talking about the property that's adjacent to William Cannon, not the Hardin building, and
So the building
it's
would
like
be
an
there,
correct.
being used by the district and could be
Correct.
repurposed to a school if needed.
That is absolutely correct. And I think there's probably another conversation after this in your future about what that looks like. Now the question becomes, what is it? When is it introduced? But I think that certainly is something that can be considered.
Okay. And do we anticipate that the Paredes will go through the same public
Yes.
process for evaluating future use of the space and facility?
Yes. Everything that we do moving forward since we started the process will go through that process, Trustee Kaufman.
Okay. Well, a lot of the questions that came up today were around just trust in the transparency and truthfulness, honestly, about what's happening. So I guess this leads to a question I have is, we're talking about the vacancies that aren't filled at Paredes, but right now, today, posted on the website, there are 10 teacher positions posted. But the number of vacancies that you stated earlier was like higher than that. So I'm curious, like there's 10 positions posted, 6 of which are classroom teachers of record.
Talking about Paredes?
Yes, for Paredes. So I'm just curious, like I'm trying to understand the difference between those numbers of what's being reported as the number of vacancies versus like what's posted. So are we actively, until this moment, are we actively trying to fill the vacancies at Paredes? And if so, how are we doing that if we're not posting the positions?
So the number I was referencing, so I think this happens quite a bit. Nothing is taken off the line, right, until an RFE is filled. There are lots of things that are in process. That process takes time. So there's always going to be a disconnect in numbers. So there is never going to be a point where the data that I have actually matches what's on the website. It's just, you can get all the way to the process and the person can say, no, I want to go to the school district. And for all intents and purposes, we'll think that it's filled, but the paperwork maybe hasn't processed. As far as where we are in vacancies, it sounds like the question is the 16 that I stated earlier versus the 10 that's online.
Yes.
I can't. The 16 that I'm referencing was a table that I reviewed about 2 weeks ago.
as we were starting through the process, or 3 weeks ago, whenever we began to build out this, okay, where are we? Look at all the middle schools, all the elementary schools and high schools we have. What are the vacancy numbers, and which ones, we do this every year, which ones stand out? And at that point, 16 versus where everybody else was 3 or, I mean, it was quite significant. I can't speak to
You
what.
didn't give up on trying to fill them?
Woodrow Bailey, would you like to speak to that?
Thanks for the question, Board President Boswell, and as well as Superintendent. The question in regard to vacancies, we have pool postings for the school district, and so the advertisements are district-wide due to, more specifically, certifications. I can say that we are continuing to process recommendations district-wide, as well as since June the 18th, some above 450 recommendations have been made, and again, this week, they continue to process those recommendations. So until the position is filled, again, we continue to process and try to find someone for those vacancies.
So if the acting administrators at Paredes last week or this week were to put an RFE in to hire someone for one of those positions, we would have processed it?
So we had a hiring event about a week ago, and so Paredes was actively searching for teachers during that time.
Mm-hmm. But has there been a cutoff where we're now not going to staff? Because on Tuesday, we publicly had a discussion about a proposal to close the school, and on Wednesday, we would offer a position to someone at Paredes and say, we want you to teach here, but maybe it's going to move to Bailey.
So the Paredes vacancies are still active vacancies in our portfolio at this point.
Okay. I mean, but there's a lot of steps that we're taking that require kind of putting a little bit on hold in order to make this decision and move forward, right? Because I understand, like, when the magnitude of this change operationally is huge, and this is where some of the trust gets eroded just because it has to. It's like suspicion that the decision's already been made because the district's moving forward with operationalizing it. But also, if we vote to approve this, the only way it gets done is if you already started the work, right? And so becomes like a distrust because people see the work happening, and they say, well, it's already a foregone conclusion. So what I keep trying to reassure people is this board still has authority to vote yes or no on this plan, and that the superintendent has a plan if we need to reverse it. But part of that would seem to be, right, that at some point, right, because if I understand correctly, if my information is correct, did we no-show the kids are kids still enrolled in Paredes right now? My understanding is that if we were to look at our systems, it would show like almost zero enrollment for Paredes because we've already no-showed the kids.
No, that's not true.
No, okay.
I don't know, yeah, that's not true at all.
Okay, so our kids are still enrolled at Paredes today?
Right, we have a plan in the case that the vote goes through, but nothing's been done.
Okay, so kids are enrolled?
Yes.
Okay, so, but I understand, like, at some point, we kind of put on hold and say, okay, we're going to plan for this potential. We're going to leave a backup plan just in case, right, because we don't want to have no way back. But, ultimately, everything rests on the decision tonight.
Yes.
It would make sense to me if we were to say, we're going to put hiring at Paredes on hold for just a minute. We're not going to make an offer to someone today, because tonight we might make a decision to close it, and we'll wait to make that offer until tomorrow, because tomorrow we can tell them, hey, this position is actually, that you applied for at Paredes and interviewed is actually at Mendez, right? That would make sense to me, but I guess now what I'm hearing is you're saying no. As of even today, there are people processing Paredes RFEs and hiring people if they're.
Well, I mean, they're still, so, I mean, it's so compressed that I don't know what activity would have occurred in one day, given what was said yesterday. I think the systems are still moving. I've given no indication of an active pause to any division, period.
Okay. Well, could you just check into that and give me an answer off site later specifically around the payroll or around the hiring?
I can.
Okay.
And the last thing I'll say, Trustee Kaufman, and this is something that I wanted to make sure I shared with our community, but you reminded me of it, and you and I texted about this a week ago, whenever I announced with Paredes staff, and I was sharing that I was meeting with the principal, the principals, and then I was meeting with Paredes staff, Bailey staff, Mendez staff, vertical team, elementary school teams, high school team, and one of the questions was, that's a lot of people to communicate with. And what I shared was to plan deliberately to ensure that we have a successful launch if the vote takes place. I have to bring people into the conversation. That is the definition of a transparency. Like, if I was to do this in the vacuum and all, that it would be exactly what we do not do here in Austin ISD. So we had those conversations and we began to work. And unfortunately, because the system has to continue on and consider a no vote plus a vote, I have to be prepared for either option. And that sometimes creates confusion and can give the appearance that the vote has already taken place and it's already done. That's the opposite. What I'm doing is making sure that if the vote takes place, we're in a strong position to launch the 26-27 school year. And if not, we're still in a good place because we've been doing the work all along. But that's what happens sometimes. I just want to make sure that it's clear that's why we have to do it, because I can't talk to staff and talk about where they'd want to go and give you a staffing plan tonight if I didn't communicate to them that Paredes may close and that we have a preference of them going to both Bailey and Mendez and that we're going to include the stipends, which means I'm talking to finance. So there's just a lot there, but I understand that's why that happens.
Okay. And then I just want to speak to the question that people had around the number. One comment was the numbers keep changing, right? The numbers at yesterday's meeting was different from numbers at today's meeting, which was different from what was on Tuesday. I just want to acknowledge from working with AISD data for years and other large district data that it is not precise all the time, right? And like you said, parts are moving. And so, but I think that there is there was some concerns around distrust because like the numbers are off. So I just want to be aware of like the plus and minus on numbers, because when we say there's 18 vacancies, but the website shows 12 and 10 of those are teachers, then it creates some suspicion from people around whether the numbers are correct or whether we even know what we're doing. But I think in a large system like you cannot possibly right now get a precise number of exactly how many vacancies are out there. You cannot get a precise number of how many kids are enrolled at a school because there are variables on it. But I just want to acknowledge that that's an issue. Okay, and then the last question I have is around the city and county communication and collaboration. So that was explicitly asked today, like, are we in communication with city officials around this? And then because Bailey itself is, a lot of its
ETJ
students don't live in Austin, they live in the county.
Yeah.
What communication and collaboration has happened so far, and what further communication and collaboration will happen with the city and county to ensure that some of the issues around safety, around traffic, around issues are addressed?
Yeah, so I would say right now it's more of an awareness than actively an ask, because the vote hasn't taken place. Again, the very same thing we just talked about. Jamie Miller, the operations officer, every year is working with City of Austin Transportation as well as others to ensure that we're prepared when the school year starts. This happens every year, especially as we launch new schools. So that relationship kind of at the design implementation level is it's a connection that is occurring continuously. That is no different here. So and that will continue. From my perspective, when it comes to CETA leadership, it's about awareness, letting CETA leaders know this is something the board is considering. If there is a need to make an ask, and operations and transportation, and Chris has today, and transportation says, hey, this is something we need to consider, the awareness has already been made, the relationships are already codified with all the work we do every year, and the ask, if it requires action, can go quite quickly. When it comes to the ETJ, which I think is what you're referring to, which is not within the city limits, but within the county, but kind of in the extra jurisdictional area, it's slightly different because the city does have review and signing authority, but the county has a different role. That is not something we often do, but we did deal with that when we worked with Menchaca, so we have those relationships there as well as we expand to Menchaca. So it's awareness at this point. We have heard the feedback from the community. We're going to explore what that could look like, and then make sure the partners that are required to kind of move the work, I think, hear from us rather quickly. I don't know what those answers are. I've heard different things, and so we're happy to do that. And honestly, I think that us being involved may help get some of the things that weren't getting across the finish line sooner.
Okay, thank you. I just want to echo, I think, particularly what Trustee Gonzalez said, just around how we got here. is not great, but where we're going, I understand where this recommendation is coming from. But I have tremendous affection and history with the Paredes community and the students that it serves and the school itself, and it breaks my heart to consider both the academic achievement that we have helped them to not helped them to achieve the last several years, and also the potential of closing the building today. But I also do not shy away from the responsibility as a trustee who's been on this board for nearly 4 years that there are different decisions that I could have made or pushed for, or questions I could have asked in the last 4 years that could have helped us to avert that. And so, the ownership for this decision, lies, the accountability and the responsibility for lies for this with, me as a trustee and with our leadership in this district. And we need to own that and, not shy away from difficult decisions moving forward, but also not to make excuses and say that this was unavoidable. This was avoidable.
Thank you. Anyone else right now? So I just want to speak. I think I saw Amory slip out. But I just want to start by thanking you, if you see this, for being here to speak to us tonight. Thank you for sharing the truth that you experienced as a student, that you were getting what you needed last year, and then you weren't. And it is not your fault that we are here. It's not your classmates, your educators' fault that we are here. It's my fault and our system's fault that you didn't get what you needed. And at Paredes last night, I heard parents and teachers talk about that and tell us that you saw what was missed, you saw what wasn't working, and you know why we're here in this moment. And I'm really sorry for that, and I thank you for that. Our community has very important things to tell us. Our community is wise, our community loves our schools, our community knows our schools, and we're stronger when we really listen and then use what we hear. And I'm sorry we didn't hear it during the year and adjust to that, because the experience on our campuses is one very important source of expertise that we need to use alongside the powerful expertise of our superintendent and his staff and the expertise that's on this board to make decisions together that work for our community. And we heard that too late, and that's why we're here. So I really appreciate all that was shared, and as we go forward, and if the recommendation is approved, we need to continue listening and working alongside all of you to make this very disruptive, hard choice work for students, to make it as good as it can possibly be and to live into the promises that are being made. That this will be a better academic environment for students. And we've heard the community. I was able to go to the Paredes meeting. I was able to go to the Bailey meeting today. I wasn't able to go to the Mendez community meeting. And I heard a lot of people tell us what they will need to make sure students have the safety, have the sense of belonging, and have the supports they need to live into the promises we're making, that this will be a better academic pathway, that this will be a pathway that will help our students get what they need. And I am committed to continuing to listen alongside my colleagues in the administration and to offer the support that's needed to make this work. And I really agree with the calls on the board to track this very closely and really have a sense that what we think will work is working, and to course correct very quickly when it's not. Not just for the schools we're talking about today, but district-wide. And to really do the work that's needed to learn about these things sooner than we did. Because I think we have seen with this decision, with our budget, with some other decisions, when information comes late, our decisions are rushed. It puts pressure on our staff. It creates chaos for our families. and it doesn't help us make the most careful, thoughtful decisions together, and to have that input from our community that makes them better. So I really appreciate what everyone is sharing, and encourage people, if we vote to approve this plan, to continue talking with us, and let us know what you need, what's working, what's not, as we track the data, understand the process, and work with you, Superintendent Segura, to get this right. So, thank you. Any further questions? Any further questions from people who've joined us online? Okay, do I have a motion to approve item 3.1, approval of the Paredes Middle School turnaround plan modification?
I move to approve the Paredes modification plan.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Secretary Foster. Is there any further discussion? Okay, having a motion by Trustee Whitley Chu and a second by Secretary Foster to approve item 3.1, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Hold on, let me see online. I can't see Trustee Hunter. And I can't see your hand, Trustee Foster.
Trustee Hunter's hand is up. Trustee Foster's hand is up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, and none left to abstain. So the motion passes with 7 in favor, with 2 opposed, Trustee De Urioste and Trustee Quintana. And before we move into executive session, the administration would like to announce that there will be 2 separate voting items at the board information session on August 13th. The first is an MOU between Austin ISD and Texas State University for the PrEP Grow Your Own grant. This MOU supports the talent strategy in building a strong internal pipeline of quality teacher candidates from existing staff, including teacher assistants and classified staff, and it is time sensitive, and we cannot wait until our regular voting meeting for that item, so we won't have our regular preview of that. The second item is a resolution regarding hazardous traffic conditions, revising the Austin ISD transportation hazardous areas so that all qualified students, including the students impacted by this vote tonight, will have transportation access to their reassigned schools. And thank you all for being with us tonight. We will now recess the open meeting at 8:07 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. When we finish with executive session, we will briefly return to the open session to formally adjourn the meeting. The adjournment will be recorded and included in all replays of tonight's meeting. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 9:01 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
The meeting is adjourned at 9:01 p.m. Thank you.